This is a GoPro. You knew that. It weighs 116 grams, and that's fine if you're running like a 5-inch mini quad. But especially if you're running something really small, like this BetaFPV 95X, or if you want the longest flight time possible, like this Flywoo Explorer, you'd like to save a little weight. And that brings us to this. This is a Naked GoPro. YouTube, please don't demonetize. The Naked GoPro is basically the guts of this GoPro ripped out of it and put into a plastic case. It weighs 26 grams. And that's pretty freaking light. But there are some people out there that are running this little guy. This is an Insta360 Go, and it weighs 17 grams. And the big question that we're going to tackle today is, if you're running a quad like this or a quad like this, which of these two is best for you? Naked GoPro versus Insta360 Go. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. Obviously, you can't compare two cameras without looking at the footage from the cameras, and in a minute, we're going to look at the footage from these two cameras and see how they stack up. But the truth is, I think that there are a lot of factors that will play into your decision of which of these cameras is right for your application that will just, one of them's going to be a deal breaker before you even see the footage. So we're actually going to start by just comparing these two cameras and trying to get any of these deal breakers out of the way. And then we'll look at the image quality and the workflow of each camera, and then we'll close up. Both the Insta360 Go and the Naked GoPro cost around $200. Well, that's sort of true. In this case, I've got a Naked GoPro Hero 6. And one of the reasons I picked that is that Hero 6s are pretty inexpensive. You can get refurbished Hero 6s off of Amazon. Well, in the United States you can. You can get them for about $200. The other reason is that if you're using Reelsteady Go, and the assumption is that if you're doing something like this, you're probably going to be doing more cinematic stuff, where Reelsteady Go is just assumed. In case you don't, Reelsteady Go is an application that stabilizes your footage, gives you that super smooth look that you see from cinematic pilots. The Hero 6 works great with Reelsteady Go. The Hero 7 does not work great. The Hero 8, I think it works okay, but the Hero 8 is super expensive. And when it comes to ripping the guts out of your camera, well, that's a 7. When it comes to ripping the guts out of your camera and putting it in this little case, a lot of people aren't going to want to commit the price of a Hero 8. Although, some people do, and I know at least one person who has actually done a Naked Hero 9, which is ridiculous, but there you go. So we'll start with the Naked Hero 6. And that puts the price at about parity, about $200. However, you do have to disassemble this whole camera. I'm going to have a video where I show you how I disassembled it, and that's going to come up later this week on my channel. So if you want to make sure you don't miss that, definitely get subscribed and hit that notification bell. Ooh, yeah, don't want to miss that. The other concern with the Naked GoPro is the risk of damaging the camera. And that risk starts when you disassemble the camera. At least some people damage the camera during disassembly, and they never get to the point that I'm at here. The other risk of damaging the camera is that this is way, way less durable when it's outside of its protective metal shell. The chances of damaging it in a crash are much higher. Most significantly, the lens. You can see here my lens is completely unprotected. Some people actually do run a protective cover on here. BetaFPV actually sells one, for example. But just the chances of damaging it in a crash, much, much higher. So this is not a good application for if you're a typical freestyle pilot, racer, or bando basher. But if you're flying one of these little guys in a cinematic scenario, the chances of crashing are relatively low, and when you crash, you're likely to be moving a lot slower, or maybe you're just a professional and you're willing to take the risk. By comparison, the Insta360 Go is pretty freaking durable. There's just not that much to go wrong with this little guy. I just noticed my kid got some strawberry on my shirt, and I was just making sure I didn't have any stains on my shirt. This shirt came from Rotorite Quad Box. They send me a box every month, and then I don't make a video about it because I'm a terrible person. But I love the shirts, and if you want to get this, there's a link in the video description where you can get this awesome original art. Another difference between the Insta360 Go and the Naked GoPro is that the Insta360 Go is completely self-contained. The Naked GoPro, on the other hand, gets rid of its battery to save weight and is powered via a built-in voltage regulator that comes with this BetaFPV kit. So it plugs into battery voltage here using this cable, and that solders up to wherever, and it can run from, I believe it's 2S up to 4S, but not 6S, at least for this particular regulator. Of course, you could just get your own regulator, but one is included with this kit right here. It's worth pointing out that more than a few people have reported that the voltage regulator board in this kit burned out their GoPro, like literally burned out the traces on the board of the GoPro. It's hard to know whether that's a thing that happens particularly often because we don't know how many of these have been sold, but I feel obligated to at least mention it. So the way the Insta360 works is you'll hold down the button to turn it on, and you'll press the button one time to start recording. And by default, the Insta360 comes set to record just 1 minute of footage at a time, which, like, you might be like, what's the freaking point of that? The Insta360 Go is intended to be sort of, it comes with like a magnet you can wear under your clothes, and you can stick it to your chest, and it can just do like a hyperlapse of your whole day, just a long time lapse. Or you can push the button and it'll record like the last 1 minute of stuff that happened. So when something awesome happens, you just save that and it'll save it. It's actually not designed to do continuous recording, but they recently released an FPV mode, which can be updated. You just update the firmware through the phone app, and then you set it to FPV mode, and it'll record for 5 minutes at a time. The GoPro, on the other hand, is going to get its power from the flight pack. So let's just go ahead and plug this in. And when we do that, we'll see this LED turns on. The GoPro is not on yet. I'm going to press the power button here one time, and it goes beep, beep, beep. That's the same sound it would make when you turned it on. It just doesn't have the speaker. We got rid of that. And then we'll press the record button one time to begin recording. And then it starts blinking, indicating that it's recording. And that's pretty much just how a GoPro works. But how do you configure it? One way to do it is to reattach the old screen using these ribbon cables, and these plugs on the back of the GoPro are still accessible, and you can actually plug those in, and then you've just got the screen and you just set your GoPro up just like usual. You're probably not going to do that in the field, but you could. The other way to do it is via the Wi-Fi on the GoPro. The GoPro still has Wi-Fi capability, and you can connect to it with your GoPro app. Although it's worth pointing out that because the Wi-Fi antenna has been removed from the Naked GoPro, the Wi-Fi radio will burn itself out. Just like a video transmitter will burn itself out if you run the VTX with no antenna, the Wi-Fi transmitter burns itself out. There are instructions on how to solder on a length of wire to act as an antenna, and I did that, and I didn't do it immediately. I did power the GoPro on 1 or 2 times without realizing before I went, oh, I better solder this antenna on. So maybe, but my Wi-Fi radio is just burned out. I just don't see the GoPro in my phone at all. So when I release the tutorial for how to set up the Naked GoPro, I will show you how to solder on the antenna, and I would recommend you do that, but I can't 100% guarantee you that your Wi-Fi won't burn itself out. Mine did. Speaking of configuration, one area where the GoPro is clearly going to win is in the ability to configure it to get the kind of shot that you want. GoPros support ProTune, and ProTune means you can adjust the ISO, the white balance, the shutter speed. You can adjust all of these parameters like a real freaking camera to get the kind of results that you want. The Insta360, on the other hand, basically just shoots in full auto mode. There's not really any options to adjust the exposure or whatnot. So if you are really focused on getting, I want to say the best results, but let's just say a specific result. For example, if you want to lock the ISO at 100 so you get the most motion blur. Only the GoPro is really going to make that possible. The GoPro also supports more output resolutions and frame rates. So this Hero6 can go, I think it goes up to 4K. I can't remember when they went from 4K 30 to 4K 60 or whatever, but 1080p, 120, 2.7K, 60, super view, 4K, slow-mo, high frame rate. The GoPro pretty much does it all. And if you don't like what the Hero 6 does, you can just get yourself a Naked Hero 7, a Naked Hero 8, or a Naked Hero 9 if you really want to be on the cutting edge. So you kind of have your pick. The Insta360 Go has a high resolution sensor, but it only outputs at 1080p. And the reason for this is, as we'll see when we get to the workflow, it's recording a hyper wide angle sort of fisheye view, and then it outputs a 1080p slice out of the center of that. And you can actually adjust that in the app to show wide angle, more like linear, and you can even kind of drag it around a little bit to reframe the shot. Not as much as with like the Insta360 One R, a full 360 camera, but some. The Insta360 Go can also output 100 frames per second for slow-mo. Well, it's not terribly slow-mo, but it's something, at 1600 by 900 resolution, so a little bit of a resolution hit there. Speaking of frame rate, another thing that has to be mentioned is that the Insta360 Go only outputs at 25 frames per second. So typically in NTSC regions, people are outputting at 30 frames per second, or maybe even as much as 60 frames per second for much smoother video. 25 frames per second, if you're outputting 35 or 30 frames per second, you're going to get some frame, they call it judder, just the frame rates won't match up and you'll get some sort of stuttering in the movement. If you want smooth 60 frames per second, you just don't have that option with this camera. So basically, the kind of person who's going to be happiest with this camera is someone who's doing cinematic work and outputting 24 frames per second like on film, or maybe somebody who lives in a PAL region and is just used to that 25 per second frame rate, and that's what they prefer to output. Most people today are outputting higher frame rates, and they're going to notice a little bit of a difference with the Insta360 Go. Let's take a look at the Reelsteady Go workflow. And the first thing to know is that Reelsteady Go doesn't have like an SD card. It just stores the images on memory, videos on memory on the camera. And the way you get them off the camera is to put the camera in its charging case, and then if you have an iPhone, it plugs directly into your iPhone. Isn't that nice? But if you're an Android pleb, then you're going to need one of these cables. The cable comes with the device, and this one, it's a USB to USB, and here is a USB to USB-C, and it's just going to plug into my phone. And then you're going to start up the Insta360 Go app on your phone. This is a separate app. If you've got the Insta360 One R, they're not managed from the same app. The Insta360 Go has its own app. Before we look at the editing process, I want to just take a look at some of the settings here that I think you're going to want to change. And one of the settings is you're going to go into the Go buttons, and you're going to set Quick Capture to off. And the reason you're going to do that is because only with Quick Capture off can you set the button press to be standard video, and you want the recording length to be 5 minutes FPV mode. It won't let you set the recording length to 5 minutes FPV mode unless you have also turned off Quick Capture. Quick Capture is just like if it's powered off and you real quick push the button, what will it do? Versus if it's manually powered on and then you press the button. So you need Quick Capture off to do FPV mode. I like to enable download files automatically so that when I plug in the camera case, it automatically pulls all the files off the camera. And then I also like to enable delete camera files after downloading to app album. This just helps make sure that the memory on the camera doesn't fill up. I like to disable the shot on watermark. I don't need my footage to be watermarked. Shot on Insta360 Go. Well, okay, so having done all that, now we've got some footage that we recorded, and we're going to go and take a look at the footage. And at this point, I can unplug the Insta360 from my phone because all the footage has been downloaded. So I can scroll through the timeline to sort of look at different parts of the flight. That's fine. I also have the option here to change from wide field of view to linear. And this is all done in software, as I guess that's the same for the GoPro. The Insta360 Go always shoots in wide field of view, and you can just sort of crop in post if you want to have a linear look. I think wide is best for most drone footage. Maybe if you're trying to do like really stabilized Cinewhoop style stuff, but especially for freestyle, wide is going to look the best. You can also change the aspect ratio. 16:9 is that normal sort of cinematic aspect ratio. 9:16 if you like portrait mode like a weirdo. 1:1 for Instagram. So what I've learned is that you actually can do keyframing with the Insta360 Go, kind of like the Insta360 One R. Although the Insta360 Go isn't a full 360 cam, check this out. If you long tap, it adds a keyframe, right? And then watch this. I'm going to long tap again to add another keyframe, and I'm going to rotate. No, I'm going to rotate. There we go. I'm going to rotate. I'm going to add another keyframe. Okay, now watch. Watch what happens when I play that back. You see, that was all done in the keyframes. That was not, you can rotate keyframing, whereas with a full 360 cam, you can just look around anywhere. But you can actually, well, you could like literally insert barrel rolls that didn't actually exist. And in addition, there's one more feature. You can actually pan up and down slightly. So if I long press to add a keyframe, I can actually pan up or tilt up and down slightly to adjust the angle and all of that stuff. Well, I got a little bit of left right as well, not much. So you can keyframe all of that stuff to kind of make the camera move just a little bit in the Insta360 app. Pretty cool. And thank you to Zorro for telling me that this exists. By comparison, here's what the Reelsteady Go plus GoPro workflow looks like. And the first thing you're going to need is Reelsteady Go, which is a $70 app all by itself. So put that as a W in the Insta360's column. Inside Reelsteady Go, you're going to load up the video. It's going to crunch the numbers there for a minute. After the numbers are crunched, you can watch the footage and see how you like it. There are some options here to choose more or less smoothness or stabilization. The advantage of more smoothness is, well, it's more smoother, but the disadvantage is that it's going to have to crop in way further and like zoom super far in order to get that smoothness. But you have the option of choosing, whereas with the Insta360 you don't. It just does whatever it does, and hopefully you like it. You also have the option here to lock horizon. So here's what this footage looks like with lock horizon off. And you're going to see just a little bit of roll left, roll right as I move through here. The movements are smoothed, but not like stabilized and locked to the horizon. Here the horizon should remain rock steady, but anywhere that I roll or pitch, there, right there, you see I sort of slid to the right, but I didn't pitch or roll. Anywhere that I do pitch or roll, it's going to have to zoom into the image, and the field of view will get much narrower in order to keep that horizon apparently locked. And here it's having to think a lot. Now we're going to compare the stabilization of these cameras. On the top, we've got the Insta360 Go using Insta360's proprietary flow state stabilization. On the bottom is the GoPro using Reelsteady Go. Both of these are set to their default settings. Well, Reelsteady Go has that smoothness slider where you can dial the smoothness up or down, and flow state doesn't really have any settings, so it just is what it is. On the right is the raw unstabilized footage, and that should be the same for both of these cameras because they both were put on the same quad and flown at the same time. I'm going to let you dig into this as deep as you want to. Watch it in slow-mo if you want, especially at times like this turn that's just coming up. When you do a sharp move, you can really see how the stabilization algorithm smooths the move out. So watch it at slow-mo if you want. Watch it at full speed and sort of just let it roll past you and just see which gives what you think is a better result. Frankly, I think both of the results are pretty good, but you may find a preference for one versus the other. One difference that you should notice between them is that flow state by default locks the horizon. As the quad rolls left and right in turns, flow state keeps the horizon level, whereas the GoPro with Reelsteady Go allows the horizon to tilt. You can kind of see it tilt to the left just there. Reelsteady Go does have the option to lock the horizon, and I did not use that in this comparison. The reason for that is that when I turned it on, it had to zoom in so far in order to compensate for the roll of the quad that the footage was just basically unusable. The Insta360 Go is shooting a very wide fisheye view, so it always has lots of extra image there to allow it to continue to stabilize without having to crop in too far. Worth pointing out also, Insta360 Go does have what they call FPV mode stabilization, in which it does allow the horizon to tilt, but I thought that it looked better using flow state, so that's what I went to. Now, a lot of times when people compare cameras, they will zoom in on the images and really just look closely. They'll do what's called pixel peeping, where they'll just zoom in and they'll try and look at the minute differences between the two cameras. And I don't think that's the right thing to do for these two cameras. They suit different purposes. The GoPro is going to do a good job for like high quality cinematic work, and the Insta360 is going to be fine if what you want to do is upload stuff to YouTube. But I do want to focus on this one section because I think it really highlights the differences between these two cameras. Do you see that the GoPro is giving us just a beautiful amount of motion blur here, leading to just a really nice, smooth looking image, whereas the Insta360 does not. And the reason for that is that I was able to lock the ISO on the GoPro to force it to use a longer shutter speed. This isn't with an ND filter, although we could have used an ND filter to even accentuate this effect. We can see here, like, you're just getting such beautiful motion. And when you freeze frame, you might go, oh, the GoPro doesn't look sharp. And in fact, I did that once, a long time ago. I did that in a review of a camera versus a GoPro, and I learned that I was wrong, that it wasn't that the GoPro was unsharp, it was that the GoPro had good motion blur, and I took that video down, and I'm embarrassed about that mistake. So we're getting nice sharp images here, but that's not what you want, and the GoPro can really deliver, and the Insta360 just doesn't, and that's okay. But it is definitely something that separates these cameras and highlights that each one is suited for a different purpose. So that brings us to the end of the video, and as always, the question, which one should you get? And I actually think this is going to be a fairly easy decision for most people, because these two cameras are both really awesome in their own way. If what you want is a pro-grade camera, and in as light a weight as possible, it's going to be the GoPro. You would choose this for all of the reasons that people already choose GoPros. Great image quality, great controllability of the settings, etc., etc., etc. The one reason you wouldn't choose it, though, is durability. This guy is not going to crash well, and when it breaks, you are not going to have Best Buy. I mean, I guess in theory you could put it back in the case. That's probably not ethical. So, if what you need is a high quality image that isn't going to crash well, it's the Naked GoPro. On the other hand, the Insta360 Go is such a cool little thing. And if you think that the image quality is going to hold you back, you need to look at Zorro's YouTube channel. He uses this all the freaking time. He does so many awesome flight edits with this, and it really proves that a good pilot, did I just say Zorro was a good pilot? Okay, a good video editor can transcend the limitations of his medium. This guy definitely gets the job done. Yeah, it only has 25 frames per second, which is going to bug some people, but it's super durable, and it has sound. So there's that. I guess one other limitation of the Insta360 that we haven't mentioned is battery life. This battery, it doesn't have an interchangeable battery. When it runs down, it's going to take you a little while to charge it. The case takes like 20 minutes to charge this guy up, and an hour and a half to fully charge the case. And you can only record for 5 minutes at a time, which some people are going to find to be a limitation, but most FPV flights don't last more than 5 minutes anyway. Whichever one of these guys you think is best for you, yes, there are links down in the video description. Thank you to BetaFPV, by the way, for sending me this 95X. I will be doing a separate video talking about the review and setup of this 95X. And in fact, someone out there has like a pro grade version of this that they're charging like $800 for. So get subscribed if you want to see that. Although I don't know if I'm going to review it because I just don't know if I could bring myself. Let me know in the comments. Should I review the $800 BetaFPV 9? It's not a BetaFPV. It's a... Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that, but I don't know how good I feel about it. Thanks to BetaFPV for sending me this and Insta360 and this. Links to all this in the video description. They are affiliate links, and when you click those links and make any purchase after you click that link, I get a small commission. It's an easy way for you to help support me. Thank you so much for watching. Happy flying. What are you still doing here? The video's over. Do you watch all the videos all the way to the end? Wow, you are a super fan. Thank you. That actually helps the channel a lot when you watch the videos all the way to the end. YouTube loves that. You know what else YouTube loves? When you subscribe. Or when you join my Patreon for as little as $2 a month or more if you feel like I've earned. Actually, YouTube doesn't like you to join my Patreon. They don't get a cut of that.